All right, let's get right into it. Today we're cracking open one of the great epics of Gothic literature, Charles Maturin's Melmoth the Wanderer. And trust me, this is a massive, winding story all about damnation, despair, and a bargain that is truly the stuff of nightmares. So our story kicks off with these words. They're describing a family portrait, and it's a portrait that's almost 200 years old. But the guy in it, well, rumor has it, he's still walking around. And those eyes, they're the first clue, the real giveaway that something is deeply, deeply wrong in the Melmoth family. So first, we have to talk about this guy, the immortal ancestor. Because look, before you can even begin to understand the Wanderer himself, you have to understand the curse he created, this legacy of absolute fear that's been poisoning his family for generations. Okay, so picture this. You're in a crumbling old mansion in Ireland, and you find a portrait tucked away in a dark, forbidden closet. The date on it is crystal clear, 1646. The man is J. Melmoth, but the family legend, the story whispered for centuries, is that this ancestor never died. He didn't pass on, he just continues. So this isn't just some old painting, it's like an anchor point for a curse that's still very much alive. This is where that old family legend just comes crashing into the present day. See, a young student is about to come into his inheritance, but he's not just getting land and a title. No, he's about to inherit a legacy of pure, unadulterated terror. So it's 1816, and a young man, John Melmoth, gets called to his uncle's deathbed. The estate is a total ruin, a monument to a life of hoarding money. But inside, John finds that locked closet, and inside that, the portrait. And his uncle, who's barely breathing, he doesn't warn John about debts or anything like that. No. He points to the painting and tells him that man is still alive. And then he gives him one last bizarre order. Find this old manuscript and burn it. And this is the quote that really gets to the heart of it. The old man, a cynical, greedy guy who only cared about what he could touch and count, he's not dying from sickness. He swears, with his last breath, that he is dying from sheer fright, because he just recently met his immortal ancestor from 1646. For a guy like that to be killed by something supernatural, well, that's the ultimate horror, isn't it?
So you have to wonder, right? What on earth could be in that manuscript? His uncle told him to burn it, but come on. You wouldn't burn it, I wouldn't burn it. John has to know what could possibly be so terrifying. So he opens up these dusty, crumbling pages, and the whole story just explodes into the past.
So inside this manuscript, we find our first story within the story. We're suddenly back in the 17th century, reading an account written by some poor soul who had his own run-in with the Wanderer. The scene is a happy one. It's a wedding feast in Spain, full of life and celebration. But then, he shows up, this mysterious Englishman. No one knows who he is. Nobody invited him. He just sits there in total silence, watching everybody. And you get the feeling his silence is louder and more terrifying than any scream.
And then things get really, really strange. The bride and groom, they suddenly hear this unbelievably beautiful music, but it's just for them. They look around, ask the other guests, "Do you hear that?" And nobody does. It's like a private concert from the spirit world, a supernatural omen that completely isolates them in their own little bubble of dread.
At that moment, the family priest walks in, sees the Englishman, and just freezes. He tries to say a blessing, but the words won't come out. It's like this man's very presence poisons the air. It chokes out anything holy. And the priest just screams out this warning, telling everyone that there's a demonic force in the room with them.
And that warning, it's the last thing the priest ever says. He collapses and dies right there on the spot, from nothing more than absolute horror. The wedding is obviously ruined, but it gets worse. Later that night, the bride is found dead. The Wanderer came to visit, and he left nothing behind but death.
Okay, so as John Melmoth reads this account, a terrifying picture starts coming into focus. That old family legend isn't just a spooky story. No, there's a pattern here, a horrifying set of rules. So now we can start to put a definition to this thing. Melmoth the Wanderer isn't a ghost. He is a real, physical, immortal being. And he travels the entire world, drawn to human suffering like a shark is drawn to blood. He is, for all intents and purposes, a predator of pure misery. This is what really codifies the horror because you start to see the rules of his game. 1, he hasn't aged a day since that portrait was painted. 2, if he shows up, it's a guaranteed sign of doom.
3, he specifically seeks out people at their absolute lowest, in prisons, in asylums, when they're about to die. And maybe the most chilling rule of all, he makes a special trip to visit his own family members just as they're dying. It's a uniquely cruel twist of the knife.
But the question is, why? Why does he do all this? Why hunt down people who are already at rock bottom? Well, this is the book's core secret, the terrible truth behind the curse. It's not just about haunting people, it's about making them an offer.
150, that's the number. That's how many extra years of life J. Melmoth got when he sold his soul to the devil. The problem? Those 150 years ran out a long, long time ago. He's been living on borrowed time from hell ever since. But there was a loophole, an escape clause written into the fine print of his demonic contract. He can be free from his damnation, but only if he can find another human soul so mired in despair, so completely hopeless, that they would willingly trade places with him just to escape their own suffering. That is his horrifying, desperate mission.
You know, the author himself, Charles Maturin, lays this all out in the book's preface. He asks this profound question: is there anyone who, in a moment of total desperation, would accept everything the world has to offer if it meant giving up the hope of their own salvation? The entire novel is basically a search for the answer to that question, testing the absolute limits of human endurance.
And so that's the question that this whole epic story leaves us with. It's the same question Melmoth asks every one of his victims. If you had lost absolutely everything, your family, your hope, your freedom, and this terrifying figure with burning eyes showed up and offered you an escape, an end to all your pain, what would you say? Are you so sure you'd say no?